Did you see the thing in Davos about thought monitoring?
Mm.
Oh, look up that YouTube video. Davos plus thought monitoring, and you will have a cow. Guarantee
I
it.
mean,
It
it's
is talk about creepy. It's on a different level.
one of the things that I did see come out of the World Economic Forum was, I think it was an American female who was saying that how we conceptualize the First Amendment is going to need to change in America.
Mhm,
That is probably the most terrifying thing. I think. uh, I,
mhm,
I think bar none, the effort to restrict people's thought, because
mhm,
that's what speech is. Your
mhm.
speech is your thinking presented for the world to agree upon, disagree with,
Right, right.
condemn, shape, right? You can disagree with me and we can come to a mutual understanding where we both were like, yeah, you know what, maybe I didn't have all the information, or maybe I
Mhm,
didn't think about it from that way, right? The point of thinking, I think I heard Jordan Peterson say, was those that your thoughts die and you don't.
mm,
Right? You can imagine what it's
mhm,
like to walk down this dark alleyway and maybe you think, I'm not going to do that. You know, you're alone late at night, nice dark alleyway, looks pretty cozy. You can think about the consequences of what might come up.
mhm, mhm,
And so that's one of these things that's so incredibly important to society as we understand it. And it's the ability to communicate your thoughts freely
mhm,
and have a conversation about them. So when the technocrats decide it would be better for everyone if you didn't say the things that you
mhm,
maybe were thinking, because right, this is the Alex Jones treatment. This
mhm,
is
mhm,
Google, Facebook, Twitter, you
mhm,
like everybody kicking him off, deplatforming him because they didn't like the things that he was thinking, the things that
mhm.
he had to say. That like that's the real, that is what is truly dangerous in my perspective. I
But
mean,
and there's a I think there's a an ebb and flow to this. You got look, in the history of mankind, the number of years that we've had freedom the way we do today, only like 150. Like, it isn't like we've been free for thousands of years. No, mankind has always had a monarchy of some sorts, some
yeah,
sort of hierarchical pyramid like structure on a global, on a massive scale, where people at the bottom had very few rights, right? And then if you can climb the social ladder, you would get more rights, you get more rights and more privileges like everywhere in the
or
world for a very long time.
or you got enough people together to take the things that you wanted.
Right, you would
Right?
rape it.
These are the Roman slave revolts,
Yeah.
which they had to put down again and again and again.
Mhm.
Right? Or you and all of your dirty friends say, let's grab our torches and pitchforks and live like they do.
Well, yeah, and
And
that
that's how
yeah.
things were made, right? Just because you're born poor doesn't mean you're born stupid. Doesn't
Right,
mean you're
right,
born without ambition. Doesn't mean you're born without capability, right?
right.
Which is why the American system works so well, is because
Mhm,
even if you're not on a completely level playing field, which no one is, you are not being actively suppressed, hopefully, right? And where you are, people will disagree. People will agree that that's not right and generally join forces with you, non-violently typically, right? If
That's
you say, "Hey,
yeah,
I'm I'm at work, I'm trying to do my job, but my boss keeps sexually harassing me," right? That becomes a challenge that you can bring to
mhm.
other people that other people will help you with. Society at large will demonize that behavior, right? That's why the American system works so well,
Yeah,
right? And of course, it's not
it
perfect.
well, no, and what's cool, right, about the ebb and flow of the tyranny to freedom sway, right,
Mhm.
is that those that sought the freedom eventually become the tyranny, right,
Yep.
only to be overthrown by the next type of thing. But what we see even in our own political system, a techno tyranny kicking in for reasons people weren't quite sure of. Like, was it because all techno companies are to the left or what's happening? Well, come to find out, when certain people buy Twitter and when the House of Representatives starts to go in and starts releasing right files of government
Yeah.
involvement, it now becomes a much more non I mean, a little bit of a
It,
techno tyranny, but more of a
it's
government
nonpartisan.
tyranny that
That,
nobody
that's
quite
the thing.
understood was happening.
I but that's people could observe what was happening and were saying it
Mhm.
using these platforms.
Right.
And the
Right.
things that they were saying
Yeah.
were being suppressed.
Of course, because it was
So
all it was happening in a way that nobody really understood that it was happening. People knew it was happening, but they didn't understand the depth of it. And what's cool about the ebb and flow is that now that's no longer a problem because it's all been released and no platform wants to get caught now doing the same thing today than it did previously. And so there's a lot less of that happening right now than there was, just 2 years
I
ago.
think the efforts, freedom as we understand it today, probably looks very different because of what we expect to be able to do with our
Mm,
time.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
like
That's a whole different
freedom
conversation.
now is like freedom now is it's not it's not just the absence of somebody imposing their will upon you. It's the ability to decide what you're passionate about and pursue it at
Mhm,
whatever degree you want. And I think to the extent that we're able to communicate that to others and to share that with other people, we're we're in a way less free than people 150 years ago might have felt. Like how many people do you think suffered from depression 150 years ago? How many people do you think suffered from panic attacks or a sense of existential crisis? Like, where
there's
is
no
my
data for
life
that.
going? Does it serve any purpose? Right? You have those thoughts today, but I'm willing to bet that people 150 years ago probably did not.
I don't know about that. Because, like, if you remember, I don't know if you know, but, like, there's this thing called the French Salon, right? Which was super popular. This is pre-American
So,
Revolution, right? And in the French salon, a salon in a French is a like a bar, right? Like a pub of sorts. Um, but it was a place of debate,
mm,
right? When we talk about like liberty, French have it. Like it's like all of our views of a republic and democracy, current, right? It's translated through the French Revolution and through the
yeah,
French, right?
I've heard that.
And it was in those places where people were asking the same questions. Like, are we going to accept this tyranny? Are we going to accept this? Where's our freedom? How do we, like, what do we do? And all
Mhm.
that good stuff. Um, and the United States is populated and born of those ideas. right? Statue of Liberty came from. I mean, there's this huge connection to that time period, and even in the way our Constitution was written, and the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution, and they were in France most of that time, right? Like most of the time, they went to France. They were hanging out in France a lot during that time frame, type of thing. They were hanging out in Spain or Germany. They were hanging out in France a lot.
Yeah.
And this is where like the ideas, and then the ideas got transferred over to today. I think that those anxiousness and the all these ideas that we have, I think that's a human condition problem. We just have a bigger voice, bigger microphone. Now everybody knows your problem. Versus before, people just said, suck it up, shut up, right? Suck it up and shut up. Now it's no, I have a right to talk about my feelings. And so people are just talking about it more. Human condition is a human condition. But we don't know exactly what. I was reading this Moby Dick, right? He talks about metal economy, being metal economy, right? He talks about like, why is he going to the ocean? Well, that was a time period back then where people felt these things, right? So I don't know. I think you could find it in literature, the reflection of the same feelings that we have today.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as pronounced and as relevant. Right? It just wasn't as relevant
I think
to
in some senses
like,
it wasn't induced to the
right.
same extent that
And
it
it
is
wasn't
now.
induced. Absolutely, because we're negatively primed. And if you watch TV, you're screwed. 100%.
Well, I mean, if you watch the news, you're screwed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you just get too much, and that just creates all these issues. I truly do believe that there is a hierarchy of things, and I think the human species in general, depending on where you're placed, you will behave in a certain way. And if you will allow it to get to your head, you will become a megalomaniac, right? You could very, very possibly. Think about every E9, right? Did you know that they have a, now look, somebody can quote me on the new stats, but post retirement, within 6 months, their life expectancy is really low. Because there used to be, especially if they were a chief for a very long time, or an E9 for a very long time, and they were being catered to all this, all of a sudden nobody gives a shit about them. The first 6 months are critical in transitioning. Critical. Otherwise, we lose them. There was a stat not too long ago that was about 50%. Type of thing.
50% of them, what, like die
Suicide.
in the first 6 months?
Yeah, suicide.
Holy shit. I had no idea.
And so, like, it's hard, right? It's hard, on the mind. Our political class, right? There's always been a feeling of they are above a merchant class because they set the rules for the merchant class. They control the warrior class. A lot of these things have not changed. You know what I mean? So when you break in to become into the political class, you've elevated your status in society. Is that really true? I don't know. But what ends up happening is that thought process of the people in the political class start doing things that they would not normally do if they weren't there. Well, and that I think is nature. I think that's human nature, is to take advantage.
Yeah. The merchant class, I think, now understands. No, I mean, okay. So what I'm thinking is, the merchant class buys the political class, and suddenly you have the self-serving interests of the guy who wants to get reelected so that he can continue to get reelected. Right? The power for the sake of power. How do you do that? By raising money. Who has money? The merchant class. And how can you guarantee that the merchant class will continue to give you money? Work together.
Well, that's here in America. In Russia, the oligarchs are the political class. So the richest people are the political class. So they don't have to worry about that. That problem set, which I think is very interesting. And so, but in our society, in American society, there is there's a relationship there because you need funding type of thing. But as I don't know, but it's still though, if you're, you might get your needs served as a merchant class by the political system, but when it comes to social status, right, the organization versus the individual, it's still an individual leverage. So if X company wants to buy influence because it's going to need X things in the future, that's fine, but that's a whole company, that's a whole industry, maybe, right?
Yeah, like the
That's looking
pharmaceutical
for,
industry
like the pharmaceutical,
or
right?
the
But it's
defense
not,
industry.
but it's not Bob of pharmaceutical industry, right? The
Yeah.
power isn't in Bob. The power is in the entire industry, boards of directors and directors and directors working together towards a common goal, right? Using incentives of stock and blah 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 to make it all work out. Unlike the political system, there's 2 senators per state, right? Like they wield the power individually, and that's
Yeah.
different than having a big money influencing power versus power for power. We as a species have always done this forever. You know what I mean? And I think that's that ebb and flow where we gotta check each other. And that's why it's in our Constitution, right? It gets out of hand, check it. It's in there,
Yeah.
like deliberately. They knew. Yeah, this is like
I mean, they were doing it as
they were doing it. Right.
Yeah.
It's our job to check it. If it gets out of hand, check it. If you like what's happening, let it go. If you don't like what's happening, do something about it.
Yeah.
Because human species, our nature is to take opportunity. And sometimes that manifests in terrible ways.
It's true enough.